This is Abrin here with Tyler Hafford on behalf of Penobscot Financial Advisors, and this is Financial Discretion Advised.
Awesome. Thank you guys for tuning back in. I'm going to give you my spiel that I'm going to start all of them off with is if you haven't listened to the first few episodes, go back and listen to them. We're doing YouTube now. Go back and watch the video of the last podcast. It was a great one. I'm still going to direct you to episode 1. The fiduciary conversation is framing everything that we're going to talk about on this show. So I think that's a good one to go back and check out for sure. But like us, share us. If there's thumbs there, click the up one. Call mom, tell her to listen to them. But today we're talking Social Security. We brought on a special guest, our fearless leader, the Chief Investment Officer here at Penobscot Financial Advisor, Jim Bradley, and he's going to bring the average age of the podcast up quite a bit.
Well, you want somebody who's a little bit closer to Social Security, right?
Absolutely.
This is my second time on the show.
Happy to have you back. Abrin said he didn't want you to come back on. I had to talk him into it, but you are going to be the expert. So thank you for
letting me come back a second time.
Yeah. And before we jump into everything Social Security, we have a little bet to settle from last week. If everybody remembers.
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
Yeah.
Big fan, by the way, of the show.
I tried to cut this part out, but Abrin again wouldn't let me do that.
Yeah. Well, when you are the master of the editing. And I am the editor-in-chief of the podcast, so anything embarrassing for you makes the cut.
Yep.
Anything embarrassing for me gets the cut. And just to remind everybody, on the end of last podcast episode, we made some stock picks. Tyler picked some fringe stock. Remind everybody what that was?
I picked DOYU. It's a Chinese game streaming company that attaches to larger companies like Tencent. And Abrin really went out on a limb and picked Google.
Yep. And I felt I was very uncomfortable the past 2 weeks, really sitting on that tough pick.
And the number of Google searches for DOYU last week.
But how high, what percentage are you up or down?
Yep. So DOYU has enjoyed a 4% run up since the last time we talked, and
that's cute.
Yes, I think it's about half of what Google gave us.
So yeah, Google, a solid 7.7%. Apparently the antitrust hasn't had any impact on Google yet. Probably a lot of investors thinking, what's the government going to do to this giant corporation if they can do anything, and hasn't had an impact. So,
and just to remind the viewers and listeners, this is just kind of speculation and fun, and every week we're going to be picking stocks, and we'll try to do it again here.
And if you're picking stocks on a 2-week time frame, then you're probably not
wrong show.
Yeah.
But let's give the people what they want and dive into Social Security.
Yeah. Right after you buy me lunch, because that was the bet. Anyways, so Social Security. Jimbo, we have you here. Like you said, you're the closest one in the company to getting Social Security.
Right.
Hopefully it'll still be there when you're that age. And
supposedly I'm 8 years from being eligible to take Social Security. So
nice.
Which is good. When I'm sitting down with clients a lot, everyone has a lot of questions surrounding Social Security. And I think it's because there is some unknowns about it out there, right? And the first one I think we should tackle is how do we calculate Social Security?
Sure.
How do we know what we're going to get?
Yeah, where do those benefits come from, Jim?
It's a great question. And where they come from is an interesting question, too, because Social Security, some would refer to it as something like Mr. Madoff might have been doing at the time, taking money from people paying in, and instead of leaving it for them, they're taking it out to people who want to take money out. And that's kind of Ponzi scheme. Has been exactly what somebody like Mr. Madoff has done.
I'm assuming Hannah's ears are perking up right now in the compliance world when she heard Ponzi scheme, but I do think it's a good way to kind of dive into this topic.
The most accurate way to dive.
Sure.
So. When we look at how Social Security pays out benefits, there is a trust fund out there, the Social Security Trust Fund, and that's what's used to get both accumulate assets and pay assets out.
Yep.
And the good thing was back when they first came up with Social Security, there were more people paying in than taking out. And that was a great thing.
Yeah.
And there's this thing called the baby boom got to the far side of that, and now that's flipped, and will continue to be the case for a while. We'll actually get back to a point where more people are paying in than taking out at some point in the future. But in the short term, we've got problems because of the fact that more people are taking out than paying in.
Sure.
And I'm pretty sure that's been a national trend. The wealthier a nation gets, less kid they tend to have less kids, as folks have more economic mobility. They can do more things with their lives rather than, obviously, in the 1980s, if you had a farm, you had to have some kids or else your farm was not going to survive.
Back in those agrarian days of the 80s, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, 1800s? Did I say 1980s? We're going to edit that right out.
But yeah, no, demographics are certainly hurting the program. Anyone who's listening to us and not watching the video, Jim is throwing some slides up. So if you haven't checked us out on YouTube, go and check this out. It's not going to be crucial to our conversation, so if you're running right now, don't run off the road and hop onto a computer or pull up your phone. But I think it's good if you want to go back and just see some of the graphs on the discussion we're having today.
Yeah.
What I'll start by talking about is how Social Security actually calculates the benefit that they're going to give you.
Yeah.
This is part and parcel to really understanding A, the strategies we're going to talk about going forward, but also B, why Social Security is where it is and possible solutions to that problem. So first off, when Social Security takes a look at your earnings, I'll ask Abrin this as a quiz question. Abrin, do they use your last year of earnings? Do they use your highest average 3 years or 5 years of earnings? How do they work it out, Abrin?
Yeah, they take your highest average 35 years. So, that's a big time frame over your working career.
Yeah.
But it's not just 35 raw years, because you can imagine if you were working 35 years ago in the 1980s.
Which I think this is a good distinction to kind of draw, because a lot of folks that I talk to who have any type of pension coming into them have an idea that maybe it's the last 3 of the top years in that type of calculation. Yeah. So, the last 35 is I was thinking they just pulled a number out of a hat, but I guess we go with this.
The actual answer is pretty close to, or pretty much right on what Abrin said. What we do is they look at every year that you've worked for pay, all the way back to the beginning of your lifetime. In my case, that would have been when I was bagging groceries at the Town Foods grocery store in Glastonbury, Connecticut. And they're going to, once they've tallied up all of those years of earnings, all the way up to where you are right now, and going forward as well, they're going to do what they call an indexing of those earnings. In other words, just bringing those earnings up to today's numbers.
Right,
so
because you could have been earning a small amount in today's dollar, in today's dollars in the 1980s, you adjust that for inflation today, and maybe you're a high earner, even though you only made $40,000 a year is a lot for that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much exactly what I was making bagging groceries in the 1980s. So what we do after that is simply, or what Social Security does, is says, okay, now that we've indexed those to today's numbers, let's find the highest 35 of those. Sure. And that's what they use to calculate your benefit. And it's not that when you look at it that way, it's really not terribly difficult to understand. That's the block that they're using. They're going to divide that by 35 to get your average indexed annual earnings, and then divide that number by 12 to get something called your average indexed monthly earnings, or AIME. And that's the basis for calculating your benefit. Once they do that, they simply run it through a formula. The first, in 2020, $926 of that AIME, that average index monthly earnings, they're going to replace at your full retirement age. We'll talk about that.
Yep.
At 90%. Then the next 4,657, they're only going to replace at 32%. And then the remaining amount beyond that, up to a limit, or to what you make as your average index monthly earnings, sure, depending upon which is more restrictive, is 15% replaced. An interesting point that comes out of that is, and I have a lot of people asking me about that, can't they fix Social Security by just making it means tested? Shouldn't they be means testing Social Security? Shouldn't they be making it more available to people who need it more and less available to people who don't? The answer is yes, they absolutely can and do by using this kind of a calculation.
Right. So anyone who's kind of watching us live on the video here, well, I guess not live, but on YouTube, you'll notice that this calculation is replacing income in the smaller brackets faster than it does as it moves through the chart. And that is essentially, to go to what you're talking about, Jim, is that if you made a ton of money in your working world, it doesn't necessarily mean you are going to absolutely benefit more at a higher rate in the Social Security system.
That's right. But both because there's a limit to what they're replacing overall, and there's a wage replacement number that gets limited, but also that people with lower wages get a higher percentage replaced.
Yeah,
great.
So the next piece that we use is to say, now that we've got that number, well, what age does that number apply to? And that number applies to what they call your full retirement age. And they could make it really easy by just saying your full retirement age is age 65. And for a long time they did that. But they started to realize they were starting to run a little bit behind on their projections on what they were going to be able to pay out. So they decided a number of years ago, back I think about 20-something years ago now, that they would change the full retirement age so that people who were going to become 65 in the short term were still going to have it at 65, but people who were going to be turning 65 later on would have to wait a little while longer. So there's a chart there, but long story short, if you were born after 1960, your full retirement age is age 67, and if you were born before 1960, it's probably somewhere between age 65 and age 67.
And correct me if I'm wrong on this, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later in the show when we talk about kind of future surrounding Social Security, but backing up that full retirement age is essentially a lever that Social Security can pull to help correct the fact that we're on the back end of it.
That's certainly a lever that they've used in the past.
Yeah.
So could they do it again? Sure.
And one of the big things, I think, when they were implementing the Social Security Administration in general is that life expectancies were a lot less than they are today. You know, people these days with modern technology and medical advancements live a lot longer than past life expectancy than back then. And that's where we need to adjust to make the calculations work again.
I'm going to have to work longer than 70.
Or just die earlier.
Yeah, back in the days when they came up with Social Security in the 1930s, life expectancy was about 65 years of age.
Right.
So.
And now we got people that can live well into their 90s, and you know it's an extra 30 years that the Social Security Administration's got to pay out.
Right.
Where does that money come from?
Awesome. So this leads into the next conversation that we have, right? When I'm talking to clients, they're saying, what's my benefit going to be? How does that calculate it? Then it comes into the financial plan of, all right, when do I take it, Jim? Aren't I supposed to just delay till I'm 70 and get the maximum amount possible, and that's just the right way to do it?
It's a great question.
You can take Social Security at 70?
Let's talk about when, actually. I was hoping that one of you would seg you into that part of the conversation. And the answer is you can actually take Social Security. These are what they call retirement benefits as early as age 62 or as early as age 60 if you're a surviving spouse. So and you can put them off beyond your full retirement age. The makers of Social Security, at least the actuaries behind the scenes, and we all love our actuaries here, are pretty brilliant, because what they do is they basically decide, okay, if you take your Social Security earlier than your full retirement age, we're going to reduce it by an amount that if you lived to be your what we call actuarial assumed age, your life expectancy, it's not going to make a difference to you whether you took it early or waited to your full retirement age, or, as Tyler brings up, put off until age 70. The reason we talk about age 70 is you can put your Social Security off. The only thing about age 70 is that you're not going to get any increases if you wait until after age 70.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when do we take it?
So when to take it really is going to depend upon the individual, and a lot of different things go into that. One thing is, when are you going to stop working? Because if you take it while you're working, you may have to defer your payments anyway if you earn above a certain wage limit. And frankly, I can't even tell you what that number is now. I think it's around $17,000 a year of wages. So if you are not yet at your full retirement age, hypothetically, let's say your full retirement age is 66 and 2 months and you're only 63, if you make more than $17,000 a year or whatever that number is, any amount above that you make, for every $2 that you make, they reduce your Social Security, or really kind of defer your Social Security by $1. Another way of looking at that is it's you're not giving up the money, they're just treating it as if you can't take that piece and they're tacking it on to when you can.
Right. I think that's the important distinction to make. It's not lost money, it's money that they're going to pay you, they're just going to give you a little bit more in the future over time.
Precisely. Now, once you do hit your full retirement age, and my mother will attest to this, you can make as much money as you want and still collect your full Social Security benefit. So that becomes, another, thing to think about. Let's say hypothetically you did retire at age 63, and you're thinking, okay, now should I take my benefit at this point? Should I take it at my full retirement age? Should I put it off until age 70? Now, there's a few different things that we need to think about there, okay? When you take it early, the question is, when's that kind of break even happen? Yeah. And so, hypothetically, let's say somebody is looking at it from the standpoint of they could take it at age 67 or wait until age 70. If they wait until age 70 and not take it at age 67, that's 3 years worth of benefits that they're not taking, but they're taking a bigger benefit at age 70. How long is it going to take them to catch up? And we think roughly about 13 years is the rough amount, just in plain value dollars. But there's complicating factors there. One of them is that while you're not taking the money, you're losing some of the opportunity that you have with that money. You could be investing that money, or you could be reducing the amount you're taking out of your investments. So you're losing some potential opportunity with that, and you're also losing out on the growth of that. Well, you're getting the growth of the money if you take it earlier, right. But if you took it later, not only would you be getting the growth on that money, the inflation on that money, but you'd be getting the inflation on what you delayed as well.
Sure.
So those are two things that work a little bit, side by side to kind of compress that benefit that you get. If we were assuming about 3% inflation and about 6% growth that you could get on the money that you would otherwise keep in investments, then the break-even period goes out a little bit to about 17 years, we find on average, different for different people. So that's what we're really thinking about is, do you think you're going to live longer than that? First of all, do you need the money? If so, that really kind of solves the solution right there. If you need it, you need to take it. If you don't need it, how long do you think that you're going to live? And if you think you're going to live beyond that point, then sometimes it's a better idea to take it.
Yeah, and if you tell me when you're going to die, we can give you the right answer to this every time, right? And that's the big variable, and that's a lot in all these. But I think it's a good thing to think about, especially if folks are talking over the water cooler and someone tells you got to delay your Social Security to 70 so you can get the most amount. Tell them about this podcast and tell them to come listen to it. Right. Really going to be specific to your situation and what you need. Like you said, if you need money, you got to take it. If you can delay, you can. But there's going to be some other circumstances that are going to help that decision, right?
There sure are, and we can get into some of the special things. But before we do, I'm going to place a memory item with each of us. There's 3 of us here, and so I'm going to assign 3 memory items. Abrin, what you're going to memorize is the fact that if you delay your Social Security to age 70, The good thing is not only are you going to get those monthly increases or those annual increases that you get from Social Security on the amount that you would have gotten, but on the amount that it's increased by too, right? So an inflationary environment is a good thing for you because you're if you put it off. In other words, if you put it off, you're hoping for higher inflation.
Yeah.
So you think about inflation. Tyler, you're going to think about investment returns, that thing about opportunity cost, right?
Yeah.
So the person who puts off their Social Security is frankly hoping that the market doesn't really do much of anything because they haven't really lost any opportunity on that money they would have been taking anyway.
So they invest in DOYU and not in
Instead of Google.
Okay, yep, I got investment returns.
And the only thing that I'm going to remember, because this is closer to my heart, is that if you delay, you're kind of betting on a longer lifespan, right? And the longer you live, the better off you are if you do delay your Social Security.
Sure.
So let's think about those three items. Abrin, you're thinking about
Inflation.
Tyler, you're thinking about
I'm investment returns.
and I'm thinking about longevity. Well, high levels of inflation, which Abrin's thinking about, low levels of return, which Tyler's thinking about, and a long lifespan, what I'm thinking about. Aren't those the very three things you're concerned about with the rest of your portfolio? You're worried about high levels of inflation eroding the value of it. You're worried about low levels of return not getting to where you need to be, and you're worried about longevity. So another way of looking at that Social Security delay strategy is delaying is kind of a natural hedge to the resources that you're otherwise going to be paying for your Social Security with.
Which is, I always find to be real interesting, right? And talking to folks about Social Security is, using this as a hedge in your plan can be a big difference maker, and sometimes it flips the needle for folks on having a good financial plan or one that we have to make some changes to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So a lot of people listening out there have a spouse. You guys earn some different incomes. What should we do? Should we take it in the same year? Should we both do it at full retirement age?
It's a really good question. Once we start talking about couples, the math gets a little bit more challenging than just, am I going to live past my life expectancy? Because when you're a couple, you have a better chance of one of you living past your life expectancy. So when we have couples, it's a different conversation altogether, because there we're looking at the dynamics of not one person but two people, and not one earnings record but two earnings records. So I've got an example of one of the things that we might look at. And for those who are looking on with the video, we've got a couple named Fred and Ethel. Fred and Ethel are kind of old style spouses, where one spouse has made a lot of money and the other spouse maybe not quite so much, or didn't make any earned income over the course of his or her lifetime. So looking at that and looking at the delay decision that one of them might make, if, like, hypothetically, let's say Fred is has been the wage earner in this couple, and Ethel hasn't got much of a Social Security benefit. And hypothetically, let's say they're both age 65, and they're thinking, should Fred put off his Social Security?
Sure.
The answer in a lot of cases is no. And the reason that it's no is because Ethel doesn't get any benefit on the spousal benefit from Fred delaying his benefit from his full retirement.
That spousal benefit's going to sit right at
Spousal
whatever he's going to take.
Not only does it sit there, but while he's delaying, Ethel can't even start the spousal benefit. So there's a big downside to a delay. Not only is there no real benefit from part of the benefit, which is usually half of the working spouse's full retirement benefit, but also there's more years of actually eliminating benefits for the non-working spouse.
Just leaving some money on the table.
Yeah, so in a lot of cases where there's a couple and one spouse has been earning and the other spouse hasn't, we quite often look at, start it as early as you can without, taking without having it delayed or deferred by wages and that type of thing.
Sure.
Another situation that we run across, and this is kind of the opposite situation, is where you have a couple where both spouses have worked, and especially when they've worked to both a relatively significant degree, and where the age of one spouse is not significantly different from the other spouse. And that's what we see in a lot of cases these days. And so I'm showing a couple, Denise and Dar, on our video here. They're both eligible to collect Social Security. And at this point, survivorship benefits, not spousal benefits, becomes more the issue that we need to look at. Because in the case of a couple where both are, for example, age 65, the probability that one of them will live past their median life expectancy is really pretty substantial. It's they've got about a 90% probability that one of them will live past their Social Security, their not their Social Security age, but their expected life expectancy.
Sure.
So, in those cases, let's think about it. If one of them decides to delay their benefit, let's say Dar decides to take hers right away, Denise decides to delay hers, and Denise lives to be a long age, they're going to be pretty happy about that decision, right?
Yeah.
Because she delayed, but she made up for it by living a good long time.
Yeah.
However, what if Denise doesn't live to be a good long age? In that case, there's still a good chance that Dar will live a good long time, and she's going to get the benefit of the increase beyond, for the rest of her life.
Right, she's going to
so
bump up.
it's a way of setting up a almost, not completely guaranteed, but almost practically guaranteed benefit that's one of them is going to be able to take advantage of for a good long time, and it increases the desirability of putting off the benefit.
Which is, it's funny because no one, when you're thinking about Social Security, it's all about what age do I take it, what age do I take it. Using strategies and working with folks who understand kind of how the Social Security system works, how we can maximize that benefit for everyone involved can be crucial to a financial plan. And it's one that I think gets overlooked as something, we'll just take Social Security whenever.
Right.
But actually can, like I said, kind of move the needle for you if it, in some circumstances.
I think what you're saying, Tyler, is that it's not one size fits all.
It is not one size fits all. No. Awesome. Yeah, and kind of moving this conversation forward, Abrin and I look at Social Security much different than you look at Social Security. And I know I'm making cracks about your age. I just want to get another one in there. But, Social Security for you is probably a real possibility, and there's no kind of writing on the wall that you won't have a benefit out there. But the future of Social Security, is that something Abrin and I or younger folks listening to this should kind of worry about? Or is it, crucial to start planning in other ways now to kind of pick up if there is a shortfall?
Yeah, it sure is something you should be, I don't know if worry is the word that I'd use, but you should certainly be aware of it, and I think be vocal with your representatives in Washington that they should be taking this seriously as well.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that, let's go back to our conversation at the earlier part of the podcast, because of the fact that more people are taking out and paying in, right now, the way that it works, the Social Security Trust Fund that we talked about is going to be exhausted. And when is it going to be exhausted becomes the question. For quite some time, they were looking at the 2030s, like 2035. And I have to tell you guys, when I was your age, I went to an in-service training on Social Security, and they brought up 2035 as this time in the vastly distant future that Social Security would start to run out. So suddenly that's starting to look a little bit more like a real year. And throw in the fact that we've had a little event that occurred this year. Where a lot of people who were paying in Social Security wage taxes, the FICA tax that we pay and that our employers pay, for a lot of people, for 20-something million people, stopped getting paid in during that period of time. Not only that, but the CARES Act allowed for employers to actually put off paying in those contributions to workers' wages. In some cases, that's, okay, it's going to be just a delay and they're going to have to make it up down the road, but will some of these companies actually be there down the road to make up the difference?
Or will that be forgiven
exactly.
down the road, right? Will the government just say that that's something that you don't have to pay back, and all of a sudden...
So we've got a problem with a trust fund that we're taking money out of, and suddenly now we're not putting as much money into, and it was going to be going bust anyway.
Yeah.
So we need to fix it. And there's really, when you come right down to it, two ways of fixing it. Either put more money into it, or take less money out of it.
Yeah.
And now, to be absolutely clear, when the Social Security Trust Fund runs out of money, hypothetically down the road, does that mean Social Security benefits are going to stop? And the answer is no. There is enough, if you look down the road, of people paying in to still pay out some of the benefits to people who are going to be getting them.
Right.
But it's roughly only about 70-something% of what they'd otherwise be able to make up. So that's the gap they're needing to make up. So let's talk first about putting more money in. There's a couple of different ways of doing that. Right now, you put in 6.2% of your wages into Social Security. So do you, Tyler. Your employer also puts in 6.2% of your wages into Social Security for a total of 12.4%.
Thanks, Jim.
And
and any business owners out there right now, you're picking up both sides of that.
If you're self-employed, this really stings, right? Because you've got to pay the whole 12.4%.
Yeah.
That's only up to a certain point. This year it's about $134,000 that's a taxable wage base. Anything you make beyond that isn't subject to that number. So that number could be raised from 6.2% to maybe 7.2% or 8.2%, and have people pay more in. And that's always a really popular thing to put in front of people when you're talking about ways to get it done.
And they already told us we'd get benefits out for our 6.2, and we know those are gone. So.
That's right.
Well, this is the Ponzi scheme.
You mean we just have to pay more?
Yeah.
Another way of looking at it is there are people out there that actually make more than $134,000, and again, that wage above $134,000 doesn't get taxed at all. So there's no revenue coming into Social Security from those wages above those numbers. And there's been talk about increasing that wage base up to as much as maybe $400,000, so that somebody who makes a good amount of money is going to be footing the bill. And if they don't change the formula on the cap for what gets actually paid out, that could have the impact of raising money going in as well. So both of those are ways of increasing benefits, or increasing the amount going into pay benefits. And then when we talk about the other side of that, there's talk about reducing benefits. Another way to not make friends is to tell somebody receiving a benefit that they're going to get less. Yep. And so I think it's very unlikely that people receiving Social Security benefits right now really pragmatically need to worry about seeing a reduction in their benefits when we get down to the point, especially a big reduction that goes on.
The most conservative conversation I have with somebody on that front is they're probably not going to reduce your benefits. If they did reduce anything, it might be cost of living adjustments in the future, but even that's really going to be hard to squeeze by.
That's right. Even something as simple as cost of living adjustments back about I'm dating myself, but in the early part of the 2000s, there was a lot of talk about a switch to what they call chain CPI, and that kind of came up and was shot down by lobbyists from the AARP and other places pretty quickly. And what that simply is a different way of calculating those increases on an annual basis. A chain CPI calculation, to kind of think about what it is, if the price of a component of CPI or consumer price index, like let's say beef, goes up, that consumer price index goes up as a result of that. But chain CPI might say, well, wait a second, if the price of beef goes up, maybe people won't buy so much beef and they'll buy chicken instead.
Right.
And so there's that substitution effect that goes into chain CPI that that leads to a lower increase number. And that can have a significant impact over a long-term period of time.
And then before you know it, you're eating ramen and you got nothing.
Ramen, if we switch to ramen as part of the chain CPI, that's right. CPI goes to 0. And then, so, that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is just like they've done before, right? Where, maybe instead of age 67 being the long end of the Social Security full retirement age, maybe for folks like me and probably more likely for folks like you guys, it maybe goes out to age 70.
Yeah.
And it's likely to probably be some combination of all of that, I would suspect, that it gets fixed with. But looking at the differences between what has to be done if we do it today and what has to be done if we put it off by 5 years or 10 years down the road, it's a lot easier and a lot less draconian when we talk about the changes that need to be made if we do it today. We start to tackle this right now. Congress doesn't like to tackle things right now. They like to tackle things down the road and kick the can.
And you said you want to change Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. All those are destination killers for your reelection.
No doubt.
And I think that talks to a really good point, right? Everyone's probably wondering, why isn't Congress tackling this? Think about what we just said. If we're going to fix this, we are taking money away from people who are receiving benefits or going to be receiving benefits, or we're increasing taxes on everyone, or at least a high proportion. Anyone who's stepping into Congress wants to have nothing to do with either one of those.
Absolutely.
And it just gets kicked down the road again and again, and leads us to have podcasts like this.
The bottom line is that this is a fixable problem, and if I'm willing to put a bet out there, it won't be probably until quite a ways down the road that I get proven right or wrong, but that Social Security will survive this.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's how draconian are the measures that we need to take in order to fix it and to keep it going. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I harp on do talk to your representatives, your senators, and tell them that you may be a voice in the wilderness, but that you're willing to absorb some smaller pain now than bigger pain down the road.
So all the politicians listening to us, get to work.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, that was great. Thank you, Jim. Before we kind of dive into the game, the stock picking this week, I'm going to make up my losses. Just want to remind everyone, share with your friends. There's comments on YouTube. If there's questions or things about Social Security that you want to pose to us, put them right there. They're right below us. Please share with us. Go to our website if you want to kind of individualize a question to Jim or me or Abrin. Probably Jim or Abrin. Please feel free to do that. And anything you can think of, Abram, before we dive into how I beat you this week in a stock pick?
No, I'm really just trying to think of my next pick. Sounds like you put a lot of research into this, but didn't pay off for you last time, so I'm not too worried.
Once again, I'm probably not going to go with one of the real speculative names like Google, but let me go with.
You got any insider tips, Jim? For me, not for everybody else, because it's purely speculative and not advisable.
I will go with a larger name. I'm going to go with Visa.
Okay.
Visa stock.
I'm going to go with a little shout out to my friends in college. We're going to go with P-Hot. And
what is P-Hot?
So P-Hot is a penny stock. That we looked at in my investment committee that I was a part of down there as a little club, and each week we'd have different presentations, and one presentation I gave was on marijuana stocks to see if every now and then it comes back into the cycle as a big buzz, and once they legalized it in Canada, there was a lot of even some clients were like, hey, there's these speculative stocks up there, and it's like newer industry. Probably keep our hands off it, but a lot of states in just this recent election just legalized marijuana, so I could see P-Hot making a little bit of a comeback. I think last time I checked at it was like 3 cents, and they do hydroponics and all that.
Well,
My buddy made a killing on it once.
let's hope it goes up in smoke. Want to remind everyone listening, this is just a speculative game. These are not investment recommendations. Do not go out and buy anything based on anything Abrin and I are saying here, but just to have a little fun. But Jim, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you guys for letting me join you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get Jim out to the House of Pancakes for a senior discount.
The foregoing content reflects the opinions of Penobscot Financial Advisors and is subject to change at any time without notice. Content provided herein is for informational purposes only and should not be used or construed as investment advice or a recommendation regarding the purchase or sale of any security. There is no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Thank you.